Welcome to Better Together.
A place where we dive deep into everyday subjects.
We are your hosts, Julian
and Carolina, two psychologists that travel the world and are very excited about the whole human experience.
So without further ado, let's dive into the episode. Welcome to a new episode of Better Together.
Today, we're going to talk about something that is very personal and deep. So, same as every week.
Possibly also relatable, though. If you have any similar trauma.
Trauma.
Trauma is the topic.
In comedy, there's this thing that you can talk and make fun of anything that you have been through or any group that you're part of. So a gay person could make fun of the LGBTQ community, or in our case, we can take our trauma and take it for a spin, make it fun, make it light. So we will both share pieces of our childhood upbringing that played a big role in our adult life and even our profession. But in their origins, they were not necessarily pretty. So I'm going to start with mine. Let's start with mine. Which it's funny because I discovered it today. That's why it was very
A home therapy session.
A home therapy session over breakfast. And I was remembering my childhood from, let's say, when I was 4 or 5 years old. I have memories of that. And I used to live in the back of my grandparents' house. They had a tiny guest house, and that's where I lived with my parents. It was a very small place. It had one room and the kitchen and a bathroom. And we all slept in the same room. And my father loved watching detective shows. Like the ones that they were in the Discovery Channel, the ones that were about serial killers and murders that were unresolved. And the X-Files and ER, Emergency Room. So all of those series that were definitely not appropriate for a 5-year-old. And a 3-year-old, because I don't remember, but probably they were there.
It was throughout your whole upbringing, basically.
Through my whole upbringing, until I moved to the next house. So that was when I was 8 years old and I had my own room.
And then basically every evening, your dad was watching that.
Yes, a series of episodes of detectives. And they were like this. I remember still the serial killers that would murder prostitutes, and then they would find the serial killer because of the DNA of the sperm in the underwear of the prostitute. And I was like asking these questions like, what is sperm? What is a prostitute? Way too early. And because this was such a common thing, I thought murder was an everyday thing. It was so normal, right? And yeah, I grew up obsessed with detectives. And I loved Scooby-Doo. Scooby-Doo was my favorite show because it was somewhat buffering that understanding of what a detective is to a child's perspective. So I was like, oh, okay, that's nice. I can understand Scooby-Doo. They are solving mysteries in a different way. They're detectives, but more child appropriate. But something that was very interesting about those times is that I perceived it as normal. And by age 10, I probably knew how to get away with murder. Because I could see all of the errors that the other serial killers made in order to be found and things like that. And they could have gone horribly wrong. Luckily, it didn't go that way. I wasn't a psychopathic child, even though I could be. And I remained super interested in getting to the bottom of things. So I think either it was there before or it was brought up by this mini trauma of having seen so many murders, this obsession to get to the bottom of things. I believe that that's one of the reasons why actually I studied psychology and what makes me good at my job. When I'm talking to somebody, I'm always trying to find the origin or the bottom line of the beliefs behind the things that they're speaking about. And this is an interesting way in an interesting perspective of how trauma can do a backflip and all of a sudden become something that you do for your life and something that you love doing. And for me, it was very interesting this morning to discover this because I am still processing, of course, this new information. But I believe that there's a component of what I do that was not perfectly pure. I always felt that I studied psychology partly for my own reasons, like for my own problems, but I couldn't identify which ones those were. And now I'm starting to glimpse at some of that. The fact that I'm obsessed with getting to the bottom of things is more like a wound than like this intrinsic passion for life, for helping. Because again, I can feel how the purity of being of service is different from my need when I'm in the therapy session to get to the actual bottom of things. It's driven by help. Yes, I really want to help you, but at the same time, it's driven by somebody else, something else. And yeah, that's something that I'm exploring. But it's interesting how trauma can make you really, really, really good at your job. Because the people that feel that they need to prove their worth through work, they will work their asses off. And there's other types of trauma that you can experience that will liberate you later in life to levels that you couldn't have imagined if you were brought up as a healthy, untraumatized creature, which nobody is. But yeah, so that's my short introduction to my trauma. Any questions or something?
So we talked about it a little bit already, but I think it's important to just see the whole perspective. And I want to highlight the point, and please expand on that. How it was for you, the process of realizing, or how was the difference between when you watched those series and how everything looked so normal, that was the status quo, and when you started noticing that it was actually not normal, like everybody was not watching those series when they grew up. How was that process for you? Was there a difference from when it was the status quo to noticing, oh wait, not everybody's doing this?
I don't think I realized until I was an adult. I don't think I realized then. It just faded from my life. My dad still watched them at dinner. We were having dinner and watching the documentaries, and by then I had become a fan. Like, I didn't have anything against those. It was exciting to hear about all of this awesome serial killers and murderers and the reasons why people would murder. I found it fascinating at the ripe age of 8. And yeah, until I was an adult, I didn't realize that maybe that would have been better if I wasn't exposed to that. And all of those things that brought me nightmares. I think the murderers and the detectives was in a way better than the X-Files. The X-Files were actually fucking me up because there were some episodes about possessed toys and ghosts and things like that I actually, until this day, I'm fearful of. So,
did you have some nightmares during childhood about those things that you were watching?
Of course, yeah. Because there was this episode of the X-Files.
Still remember it vividly.
I remember it vividly, where there's a teddy bear that gets the eyes red, and it was sort of like a demonic teddy bear. And since I saw that episode, I was so young. I was for sure 5 or 6. Why would they watch that? in front of me. Like, why would they? And they were like, no, go to sleep, go to sleep. And then I would just see it anyways because the TV was there. My bed was next to the TV, so I would see it. And you tell a child don't watch, and then they're like, yeah, I will watch. Like, it's still in high volume, and like, how am I going to sleep? And this brown teddy bear with red eyes was under the bed of a child, and then the child was like going to pick it up, and then she was like drawn under the bed or something like that. It was
Like
scary
the worst
shit.
childhood nightmare ever.
The under the bed monster. And I was not only scared of my toys being possessed, but also about looking under my bed and being sucked into it. So basically, every night I would put all my toys into the wardrobe and, just take them out next morning. Would be fine. I wouldn't be terrified. I actually told this story when I was doing the postgraduate certification in cognitive behavioral therapy. And I was telling this, and then one day, because I was having night terrors, all my childhood, of course, because of this, I actually wanted to, like, I put all my toys. I was already bigger then. I was probably maybe 10. And then I was waking up in the middle of the night and crying out loud. And then my mom came to my room and she was telling me, without asking what my nightmare was, she was telling me that if I was thinking of bad things happening all the time, sometimes you make them happen. It's great advice if you're in the therapy room and you're trying to talk to somebody that's very pessimistic about how they're creating their own reality. But if it's a 10-year-old that what's on her mind is that her doll that it's in the wardrobe is going to crawl out of it and murder her, just telling that, like, when I said it in class, my teacher was like, it's insane that you didn't develop an OCD or like a serious mental disorder. I was like, yeah.
I'm getting chills right now.
It was fucked up. And I don't think my mom realized, like, she was just half asleep and she was just saying the things that she would tell an adult, but she didn't know that I had child fears. And my fear was that the doll was going to kill me. And then it's like, don't think about it or it will kill you. So that's how I got night terrors until I was about 18. So it never actually went away. Eventually it faded. But yeah, it's interesting how those things that your parents don't know, they're really making an impact on you. They do. They stay there. And I think it's a big part of why I became a psychologist, to understand the psyche, to understand why people become murderers, and also to solve the mysteries of the mind. So, yeah, that's how trauma actually can be a motivator, even though it's a shadow motivator. It's like, I really don't want to feel that, or I don't want other people to feel that, or I want to help other people come out of that. Yeah, it's a motivator, and it can help you study, and it can help you get good and get really good, and eventually you reach a point like today where you're like, damn it, does my professionality come from trauma? But yeah, I think I think there's the two sides of the coin, which is, yes, it was shit in that moment. Yes, it's really good right now. Let's appreciate both, and let's appreciate the journey that it took to see both as two sides of the coin.
Before you jump ahead and say everything is fine,
Yeah.
still want to go into, you said it slowly faded after 17, 18 years old. but there must have been a time where you noticed that you had those night terrors, and within your study or afterwards, like, okay, that was not the norm, that you had night terrors all the time of those dolls.
It evolved. It was no longer dolls who was murderers eventually, or ghosts. And I think it stopped because I got a boyfriend and I started sleeping with a boyfriend. And then I wasn't alone in the room. And that was the reason. But as long as I was sleeping alone, I had nightmares.
Since then, you didn't sleep that many times without another person in the room, right?
I used to sleep in the...
Oh, you did?
Yeah. I slept for about a year alone. And
Did it come back?
I still had nightmares, but that there was a person in the living room. But then that turned out to be true later. A great story.
For another time.
For another time. But yeah, I would have often nightmares. More often than when I sleep with somebody.
And was there a way that you actually dealt with them, or they just naturally faded then and you didn't have to do anything with it?
I think they faded.
Okay.
Yeah. Or I dealt with underlying reasons. So I worked a lot on my daddy issues and my mommy issues and childhood things that needed to be brought up to the surface. And I think those helped cleanse a bit my psyche. And also just reason. Like it's very unlikely that a doll is going to be possessed by a demon and murder me. But yeah, it was I think mostly just that it faded. Like it lost its potency. Potency?
Potency,
Yeah.
Potential.
Yeah. But let's talk a bit about your trauma, because we're halfway into the episode and we didn't hear your.
Sure. So...
Do you want to finish something? Do you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, so... Because now when I tell my story, it feels almost like boring and low-key. But...
It's not. It's very real.
Let's wrap up yours, just to give a quick summary. So your main thing, what you brought forth now, was seeing all the murder series when you were growing up, and that brought you to understand and be a detective of going to the bottom of things, which is great for your psychology practice now. But so if anyone needs like really figuring out what their trauma is, just she knows. But that also brought some trauma through your nightmares, through other ways of like difficulties of dealing with that in the childhood.
Yes.
And I think it's, as you said, now we can bring it up. It has the two coins. It was really tough during that time, but you were able to turn it into something useful, something that brings you forth or further now, that makes you really good at something.
Yeah.
So whatever.
Eventually, I think it made me comfortable with the darkness and obscure sides of the human psyche, like the worst that a human can be. So I'm that person that can hold both the light and the shadow. And I think that that's something that people that go to my practice understand.
Yeah.
That they can say the worst shit that they have done, and they will not be judged. They will be held in that space.
Yeah, you already told a couple of stories and people just came to your practice and they were like, I think I want to kill myself.
Or I think I'm a pedophile.
Or that. And you were like, interesting, how come?
Yeah.
And so I think it turned out to be a huge skill. But you had to go through a lot of stuff in order to get where you're at right now.
Yeah.
But I guess there is hope that even though there is trauma, it can be turned into some benefit, something actually useful and good for you.
Yeah. There's this saying that I live by, which is you can only take people to the depths that you have gone yourself. And I've been I've been in the darkness, and I've been in the light as well. So much in the light. So I feel that that's an asset in the type of profession that we have. Yeah.
All right.
All right. I'll
Let
go
me
to
see.
your trauma.
Where do I start? All right. So for you it was, well, both, I guess, your mom and your dad. I think mine in that case is mostly related to my mom. And I guess it's about conflict. Conflict is a recurring theme for me, not being really knowing how to deal with conflict when it arises. And that I have to, or had to figure out, I guess, in the past years, where it actually came from. So we were talking about what kind of examples of conflict behavior do you have? And that was like an interesting question, interesting realization that I went into. And so the story, super basic example of a relatively normal situation is me as a teenager, or probably even younger, but I don't recall it that often, was I wasn't doing something that somebody told me to do so. As everybody, right? As everybody as a child. But then the reaction is, I guess, the important part, which is deep, suppressed anger and self-hatred of my mom about herself, and saying something like, how could I have done something like that to her? How do I not respect her in a way, or do I not value whatever she's saying? And
what could she have done as a mother to deserve this? Or
yeah,
did she
exactly. Yeah, what has she done wrong to me that I do something like that to her? Like really putting this guilt tripping, the shame on me. How could I have done that? And then usually just not talking about it or asking why or anything, just walking away with this cloud of anger towards me, obviously, but also, I guess, towards herself. And then just fading. She just went away, just walked down the stairs or whatever. But then for the next day or 2 days or 3 days or whatever, this underlying feeling of this, like, oh, you've done something bad, was still continuously there. I still felt it. She didn't say anything, and that's also quite often her excuse, but I didn't say anything. But I was feeling all the, what is it, disappointment, the dislike, the...
I think it's strong. Like
It's very
I've
strong.
been in presence of it. Like
Yeah.
your mom still does it till this day, and she has a very powerful energy. And when she's angry, like secretly suppressed anger, it's like there's smoke in the room. Like it smothers you. And I think it's palpable, and it's probably one of the reasons why you can feel so much as well.
Yeah, so I think I had the first memories around when I was like 7 or 8, where not necessarily me, but my parents had a little, not even a big fight, but more like a disagreement. And the usual behavior of my mom is this secret anger and stopping to talk, like, oh, whatever, let's not talk about it, and just trying to get out of the conversation. And my dad is literally just getting up and walking away if there's like too much tension in the room. He cannot stand it. My mom just stays in it because that's her way of dealing with it. And like saying with her energy that everybody's shit around her. And me just being around, just noticing the room, and just feeling everything. And I guess that's why I'm so sensitive now to everybody around me being in this anger or conflict state and immediately gets triggered. And so that's hypersensitive for me. Whenever there's a room, there's tension, there's a disagreement, I feel it instantly. And I'm like, oh, I want to close off and walk away. Like, then I get the behavior of my dad and or the secret anger that my mom showed me, basically, how to deal with conflict.
Mm-hmm.
So these were my 2 examples of how to deal healthily with conflict. that's all the conflict I knew, basically. And that's what I perpetrated until quite recent.
And how has that enhanced your practice?
So now it's, for me, really visible and visceral when there's something not going right with the client. When there's either the client not wanting to go in this direction, when I said something that they disliked, when I said something that was not leading towards what they wanted to do. And that can go in two directions, right? One is there's a barrier that they don't want to cross, but it's actually really important. And can also be a notifier for me to knowing, okay, let's go in a different direction. Not today, or it's not important. So for me, it's really useful to know when the other person feels like open and can open up. It feels easy and feels good. So that's what I'm trying to do all the time, right? Make the other person feel good so they can open up. And when I notice they're closing off, I know I need to either pierce through and see, okay, what's behind it, or let go.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's super valuable in the coaching relationship, to know what's happening in that very moment, very present in real time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, that way of not being able to deal with conflict, now it's a lot better. Now I can stay in it and feel it and not have to run away. A lot of practice though. But that helps now to really see through what's happening and can direct the conversation a lot better because I'm not freezing anymore.
Yeah. And it's crazy because it's almost like this mind reading tool. It's not mind reading, but it's mood reading,
Yeah.
energy reading that you have very strongly. And I could, like when we met, I could immediately identify that you could feel it, because I also felt it also because of trauma. Like, yay, trauma can make
We're
you
a
very
trauma match.
Woo! That's usually what happens with successful couples. Eh?
They're matching the trauma.
They're matching the trauma. They just help each other grow from it. But yeah, just the perception that the energy shifted, or that the other person somehow is feeling something that they're not saying they're feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, when you have something, when something is off and you dislike what I did, I immediately like, what's up? You hating me secretly?
Yeah, we ask each other that a lot.
Yeah. And so it's really helpful to open up conversation, because as I learned from my mom, if it keeps like being suppressed, she explodes at some point for random things. Oh, I didn't put the wash dishes away. And she just explodes about it. And those things are now very helpful to understand. There's emotions that are being suppressed. Understanding how that actually, it's not, I heard a great analogy, which is, it's not like you throw out this luggage of emotions out the window and it's gone, but you rather store it in the basement and you think it's gone. You just put it all the time, another luggage in there until it's completely full. And then it just breaks out.
Yeah.
So you think it's gone, but it's not. And so that's happening when somebody lashes out, when somebody just explodes, is because they haven't dealt with the stored luggage, with the emotions. And so that's something I fell into, but now it's a lot better for me to actually express those things, go into this little bit of conflict to let those emotions go rather than just eating it up.
Yeah.
That's like so valuable, this insight for our relationship, for any relationship with a client, to understand it's not personal. It's this conflict that's happening, and that's fine. We can stay in it, but deal with it, talk through it. And that's what I didn't learn, but now I see it's so valuable and see as such an important tool in relationships in general.
So to recap, what you develop as a survival strategy as a child and a teenager when dealing with your mother, by reading the energy of the room and the non-verbal cues that she was giving, evolved into an ability to understand and hear people on a much deeper level as a therapist, as a coach today.
Yeah, that usually people wouldn't express or wouldn't say. I can still notice it, that they want to actually say something, and then prompt them towards it and stuff like that. Yeah. So before I was trying to avoid my mom's bad feelings, and now it turned out to be a detector for people suppressing something and being able to open the space for them to actually express it.
And there's no hiding.
No, like as soon as you get some experience and noticing those patterns, everybody has those. Everybody has weird behaviors in certain contexts. For you, it's like, I need to just know the bottom of it. I can't just stand just not knowing whatever it
Need
is.
to solve the murder.
Yes.
Otherwise, there's a murderer outside.
For me, it's like, this. What happened? What's weird? Everybody's really feeling weird. Who is it? Who's not expressing the conflict or whatever? What's underneath? And that can be kind of weird, but it can be also a great tool if you make use of it.
Yeah, it becomes a great asset. Honestly, I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't do things differently.
Yeah.
Or I wouldn't ask my parents to have raised me differently, because that made who I am today.
Yeah, like when people come to your coaching sessions, usually it's like they come for 1, maximum 2, and then like, I need to process because you went so freaking deep that I need to like completely reiterate my perspective of the world.
Yeah. But
It's unique. It's great.
it's intense, so it's not for everybody. But I feel that, yeah, it's this drive for going to the depth of it, to the origin. And I found it also great when we matched in our traumas, because I was also like, super sensitive, and then we were feeling each other and validating. Whenever I was feeling angry and you would ask, like, are you angry or something like that, it would be a validation that, oh, you can actually perceive the emotions even if the person is not saying anything. And we got really good at perceiving just by bouncing off of each other. Like, what are you feeling right now? Like that time that we were driving, you were driving somewhere in where was it? Oh, I don't remember if it was in France or whatever, in our road trip. And then I was looking through the window, super happy. And then all of a sudden my heart started racing. And I was like, what's going on, babe? Are you okay? And you were like, I just had a thought. What if the police stopped us? And I was not even looking at you. I was just next to you, and I was feeling everything that you were feeling. And those moments are just really good validations of how much you can feel if you just start to lean into your sensitivity. That is trauma-based. Cute. Probably not. Like, maybe we had it as children and then we had to become tougher and block it out and just suppress it. But yeah.
That's so far our coping mechanism, and everybody has different ones, but everybody has them.
Yeah.
And so I guess now it's just your turn on figuring out what was the most memorable pieces of your childhood, what's the weird behavior that a partner or a friend is pointing out at you, and then you can go deeper in those and really understand, okay, what's the trauma and how can I make really good use of it? How to bring out the best in me, actually.
Yeah. Blue, which is my beloved mentor, she says that your biggest challenge is also your biggest superpower. So whatever was very difficult for you can, on the flip side of the coin, can become something that is really powerful in your life. Because if you can go through it, you can guide other people through it. And the rewards that you reap from going through that journey of discovery are tremendous. So, yeah.
Go for it.
Go for it. Go and check out your trauma. It's important. It's important that it doesn't go unhealed.
Uncontrolled, yeah. Because then, you're meeting the wrong people and brings out the worst in you. Because they're the wrong match for your trauma.
Yeah. Or just keep on playing the same patterns instead of transmuting it into something that is really powerful and helpful.
And if there weren't enough ads in this podcast episode or our coachings, just coach or as therapist is great for that. Just saying.
Just say, definitely. Yeah.
Anyways, all right. That's enough of our trauma and what bad things happen in our lives. But yeah, I hope you could take something from it and it was useful. Maybe
Hope you could relate a bit
relate and
with different stories, but still relate, because everybody goes through
every single person.
either small t trauma, which is like the day-to-day smaller abuses or things that affect you and slowly kill your soul, but you don't notice as such a big event, or big T trauma, which is episodes that you remember. Either of those we all experienced, or both.
So yeah, maybe reflect a little bit. Feel invited to reflect. Until the next episode next week.
Yeah. And disclaimer, please don't go into very deep trauma by yourself.
Yes.
Just have a friend by your side or a healthcare professional.
It can be that the basement is exploding if you open the door, Just,
Yes, there's a lot of feelings to be felt the first times that you go into that terrain. Okay?
all right.
Okay. Stay safe. And love every part of you, even the part that is a bit traumatized.
Thank you so much for listening. See you next week.
See you next week. Bye-bye.